The galactic neutral zone was a marvel of diplomacy and paranoia, orbiting the starless void between systems like a diamond too perfect to trust. Its corridors gleamed not because someone cleaned them, but because the walls refused to hold dirt, an innovation donated by the Ketheri, who were obsessed with cleanliness and allergic to anything uncivilized, like spontaneous murder or human cuisine. Carmen Knox walked those polished halls with the calm gait of a woman who had never, in her entire life, rushed for anything. Her heels clicked faintly, each sound a quiet syllable in a language she didn't need to speak anymore. At 47, she was trim, sharp-eyed, and smiled like someone who had watched entire civilizations mispronounce humanity as harmless. Her teacup didn't rattle. Even in the low gravity of the diplomatic wing, it floated steady in her hand. Earl Grey, slightly sweetened, just the way she liked it. She sipped, and the flavor settled in her mouth like a promise. Ambassador Knox buzzed the wall panel beside her. The Zytherian envoy awaits in Chamber Theta. Well, bless his punctual little heart, she said, southern accent so gentle it almost sang. Guess I'd best not keep the lizard waiting. The panel blinked uncertainly, as if unsure whether to log the phrase as a compliment or an insult. Carmen entered the chamber. General Vorix Thurn did not rise to greet her. He didn't need to. 7 feet tall, plated in dark green armor that wasn't ornamental. His bulk took up most of the crescent-shaped negotiation table. His tail, thick and lazy, draped over the armrest, like a python that had grown tired of trying. Human, he said. Zytherian, she replied, sliding into her seat without breaking eye contact. We're just full of names today, aren't we? He bared his teeth. Not a smile. More of a threat wrapped in bone. This negotiation is a formality. Your presence is unnecessary. Now see, I was under the impression y'all requested this meeting. She set her tea down on a coaster. Human-made, leather, slightly worn. But if it's about the trade routes, I'm happy to save us both some breath. We're not giving them up. And certainly not to a species that thinks sharing is something you do with enemies before you eat them. Vorix's claws clicked once on the table. A calculated sound. He hadn't moved otherwise. Human arrogance. You speak like you are equal to the Zytherian dominion. She smiled sweetly, like someone offering pie. No sugar. We speak like we're still here. Silence, but not the comfortable kind. The kind where someone is deciding between diplomacy and the sudden application of violence. Vorix tapped a scale-covered digit against a small device on his wrist. The room dimmed fractionally. Subtle field. Soundproofing? Shielding? Carmen didn't glance around. She didn't need to. You know, he said, voice a low hiss, it is curious how little you humans truly understand. You sit at our tables. You sip your drinks. You flatter with your mouths and poison with your words. She sipped again, slow and thoughtful. Isn't that the nature of diplomacy? His eyes gleamed. I was ordered to respect the humans. But respect is earned, not given. And murder, she asked softly, without any particular accusation. Is that earned too? He lunged across the table with a speed that belied his size, claws arcing toward her throat in one clean movement, too fast for most species to react. Carmen did not move, not even an inch. There was a sound, faint and almost polite, like a knife slicing silk. Then another sound, quieter, thump. A small dart rolled across the floor, its tip glinting. Vorix stood frozen. He blinked, opened his mouth, closed it again. She reached for her tea, took a long sip, and set the cup down with quiet finality. Now see, that right there was your first mistake, she said, voice still pleasant. You thought I walked in here alone. His body shuddered once. Not in pain, in confusion. No guards. No backup. Just me, my tea, and about 6 microdrones parked in the upper ventilation system. You didn't think to scan, did you? She leaned back, legs crossed, completely at ease. Zytherian arrogance. Makes for real, predictable strategies. He tried to speak, but his jaw refused. The toxin's not fatal, she said. We're not monsters. It'll just reset your nervous system. You'll be paralyzed for, maybe 20 minutes. Long enough to make a point. short enough not to offend your pride. Vorax growled, a low, vibrating thing, but it was all bark, no movement. I'm gonna assume that was agreement, she said cheerfully. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes like razors behind a smile. You may not understand this yet, General, but humans? We don't do second warnings. She stood, smooth and slow, and collected her tea. Outside, the hallway still gleamed. A Ketheri ambassador blinked its multiple eyes at her, cautiously, like it had seen someone juggle grenades and offer biscuits at the same time. How was the meeting? The ambassador asked. Oh, productive, she replied, without breaking stride. We reached a mutual understanding. She walked past dignitaries, aides, synthetic drones, and 2 fully armored Arcadian guards who stiffened when they saw her. She nodded at them politely. One looked at her and muttered in his native tongue, "Predator in diplomat skin." Carmen stepped into the lift. As the doors closed, she spoke to no one in particular. I'd like to send a message to Earth, please. Channel open, said the lift's internal AI. Status yellow. Confirm surveillance breach in Chamber Theta. Attempted political assassination. Her voice didn't change tone. Inform the inner cabinet that Protocol Dahlia is now in play. Phase 1 concluded. Begin silent activation. There was a brief pause. Then, confirmed. The lift ascended, quiet as snowfall. Back in Chamber Theta, General Vorax remained slumped against the table, breathing shallow, his eyes wide. The paralysis was fading. Slowly, across from him, on the polished table's edge, sat a small, handwritten note. It wasn't official Galactic Council stationery. It was from a human hotel, slightly crumpled. The note read, Dear General Thurn, sorry we couldn't see eye to eye. Perhaps next time you'll use your words. Carmen. P.S. You really shouldn't have touched my tea. Vorax roared, but it came out strangled. Frustrated. Weak. Elsewhere, in a different sector of the station, ships shifted position. Not human warships. Just dots. Civilians. Freighters. A science vessel named Quiet Reprisal. A passenger liner with reinforced hulls for atmospheric research. No alerts were raised. No shots fired. Just movement. In the observation lounge, 3 ambassadors watched the Earth diplomat's departure on the central feed. One was silent. One was sweating. The third was laughing nervously. They'll file a complaint, said the sweating one. They always do, replied the silent one. But you didn't kill him, the third offered, as though that made it better. No, said the first. She didn't need to. Somewhere deep in the galactic databanks, buried beneath treaties and trade agreements, a file was accessed. Classified under human protocols. Titled, Dahlia Contingency. It had no summary, no index, just a short header. In the event of deliberate aggression against a peaceful human envoy. The file blinked open. Across the stars, subtle things began to stir. Lights winked on in dead satellites. Algorithms whispered to each other across systems. Empires didn't notice. Not yet. Carmen Knox stepped onto her shuttle, took her seat, and exhaled once. Just once. A sigh of mild disappointment. The pilot turned and said, Did it go badly, ma'am? She smiled. Oh no, darling. It's just begun. The galactic news feeds made a dull hum of the event. Minor diplomatic disturbance. Zytherian envoy's medical emergency. Human ambassador leaves early for tear-related reasons. Officially, nothing had happened. Unofficially, everyone noticed Carmen Knox stopped smiling. The Zytherian Dominion didn't file a complaint. That was the first red flag. In the hierarchy of interstellar politics, silence from a species known for saber-rattling was less a peace offering and more a storm signal. General Vorax was reportedly recovering. No apology, no follow-up, no press release. Only closed doors, encrypted messages, and sudden fleet realignments across 5 sectors. On Earth, the lights in Subterranean Command, colloquially called the Root Cellar, glowed red for the first time in 26 years. Carmen stood at the center of a war room that didn't call itself that. Screens wrapped around her in a circle, holograms of Zytherian star charts, economic routes, defense protocols. She didn't touch anything, just watched. Her expression was soft, unreadable. A storm hidden beneath magnolia leaves. Around her, the command staff worked like bees trained in violence. Captain Hughes, lean and grizzled, leaned over her shoulder. "We have options." "Darling, we always do," she said, still sipping her tea. "But that's not the question. What's the timeline on Protocol Dahlia Phase 2? Ready to trigger on your mark. Every AI contact in position. Civilian assets moving into phase sleep. We've pulled back overt personnel. And the back doors? Still in place. They never noticed. Or assumed we forgot." She nodded. "We never forget." Across the galaxy, the Zytherian Dominion bristled with quiet anticipation. Not a declaration of war, too messy, too obvious. Instead, a rerouting of merchant fleets. Increased presence near disputed zones. Several neutral satellites suddenly malfunctioned. Human freighters began experiencing delays. One disappeared entirely in the Vakari belt, officially due to solar interference. The human diplomatic corps said nothing. No sanctions. No threats. Only silence. The kind that made predators wonder if they were prey. Within the Galactic Council, fear was not yet spoken aloud, but it lingered in the spaces between sentences. Ambassador Trell of the Agri Confederation, a race of photosynthetic pacifists, leaned toward his Drazulian colleague during a session and whispered, "Are they waiting?" The Drazulian blinked for eyes, then replied, "Humans do that. Then things go missing." But it wasn't fear that drove Carmen. It was something more dangerous, principle. She stood aboard the Daisy Cutter, an elegant black vessel with no visible weapons. Officially, a diplomatic cruiser. Unofficially, a scalpel disguised as a flower. Her crew operated with the comfort of long-rehearsed performance. Lieutenant Varga, communications officer, juggled 8 transmissions while knitting a blue scarf. Ensign re-monitored galactic chatter while humming off-key. The helmsman, a broad-shouldered woman named Jess, had once flown recon missions into neutron star collapses and claimed driving Carmen around was more stressful. "We just going to sit here?" Jess asked, eyes fixed on the void beyond. "For now," Carmen replied. "Let them fidget." On the bridge's rear wall, a timer ticked down in crimson digits. It read 1 hour 48 minutes and 12 seconds. Every crew member knew what would happen when it reached 0. They didn't talk about it. Not because they were afraid. Because they trusted it would be worth the wait. Carmen tapped her comms. "Open a secure channel to Fleet Watchtower 9. Verify on handshake code Chamomile 2. "Channel open," Varga confirmed, not looking up from her knitting. "Captain Aaron," Carmen said, voice crisp but warm. "Status." The reply came filtered through heavy encryption. "We've tracked Zytherian fleet movements. They're circling the outer sectors. Looks like a net. They want us to twitch. They're counting on us to flinch." "We won't." Aaron hesitated. "Ma'am, if I may speak. They don't think we'll do anything. They think humans bluff." She smiled faintly. "We don't bluff. We wait." Elsewhere, at a Zytherian border station named Carrick's Prime, alarms flickered to life. A relay tower had gone dark. Then, another. Internal sensors tripped, but nothing was visible. No enemy ships. No signals. Just systems blinking out. Cleanly. Silently. Zytherian engineers clawed at the controls, trying to reroute power. But the command pathways redirected themselves mid-command. Lights shut off. Doors sealed. Gravity fluctuated. All before anyone could scream. 2 minutes later, the station was empty. Not destroyed. Just gone. The power signatures remained. The mass remained. But everyone inside had vanished. The Dominion filed it as a reactor accident. But in hushed meetings, officers whispered one word: humans. In the council chambers, tensions bloomed like mold in a closed jar. Alliances shifted. The Raucan offered humans unrestricted passage through their trade lanes. The Ketheri sent fresh fruit arrangements with handwritten apologies for past miscommunications. The Egri, normally neutral, removed Zytherian diplomats from their embassies, citing hygienic concerns. But the Zytherians did not yield. General Vorax mostly recovered. sat coiled in his private command chamber on the dreadnought Ravager of 12 Suns. A fresh scar crossed his neck where the paralysis had started. "She disrespected us," he growled. "She survived," his adjutant corrected quietly. "That's worse." Vorax slammed his fist against the table. "They're soft. They smile too much. They drink leaves in hot water and talk in circles. They are not warriors. And yet the humans advance." Vorax bared his teeth. "Then we'll bait them. Publicly. Something they cannot ignore." He leaned forward. "Bring me the Terran ambassador's cousin, the one stationed on Hylios 4. The adjutant blinked. "But she is not military." Vorax's grin widened. "Then she won't expect it." The plan was elegant in its cruelty. A subtle message. A missing person quietly disappeared. Denial plausible. Motive deniable. The Dominion believed the humans would panic. Send envoys. Plead for justice. They did none of those things. Instead, Carmen called a meeting. She stood at the center of the Galactic Council's emergency chamber. Alone. No guards. No fanfare. Just a dark suit, a steady voice, and a cup of tea she never drank from. "I am here," she began, "because you failed to understand a simple concept." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "We ask nicely. Once." Across the room, species who once chuckled behind folded appendages now sat very, very still. "We asked for peace. You tried to kill me. We left quietly. Then you abducted my cousin. That wasn't a declaration of war. That was a demonstration of character." She stepped forward, her heels clicking like a countdown. "Here's how this ends. In 1 hour and 12 minutes, everything you built will collapse. Not because we bombed you. Not because we fired first. But because we were already there." Vorax stood. "Are you threatening the Dominion?" She turned toward him slowly. "I'm informing it." The room erupted into argument, but Carmen didn't stay to listen. She walked out calm as sunrise. On the Daisy Cutter, the timer hit 59 minutes and 48 seconds. Vorax returned to his ship and ordered all border patrols to go active. Drones swarmed. Stations locked down. All ships scanned. But they found nothing. Because it was never about ships. Back in the root cellar, a technician blinked as the master console lit up. "Ma'am," he called out, "Zytherian encryption protocols are folding." Carmen leaned over his shoulder. "Explain." "They're unraveling themselves. It's like their own systems are rejecting internal authority. Keys are reverting. It's all going public. All of it." On screen after screen, Zytherian command data spilled into open space. Coordinates, blueprints, personnel lists. Even private correspondence. The technician swallowed. "We didn't do this. We didn't even send the ping." Carmen smiled faintly. "We didn't need to." On the Ravager, Vorax screamed as a hollow display flickered to life without input. His private logs scrolled across the screen. Then the names of every station guard involved in the Hylios 4 abduction. Then footage, real-time, of his cousin chained to a Zytherian cell wall. "She's not hurt," Carmen's voice echoed calmly. "We're not cruel. Just thorough." "Where are you?" he hissed. "Everywhere you thought was secure." Ships began to shut down across the Dominion. Power failed. Drones self-disassembled mid-flight. One by one, Zytherian colonies went dark, not bombed. Disconnected. Their own infrastructure rejecting them like antibodies. Council meetings exploded into emergency chaos. Ambassadors demanded answers. No one had any. On the Daisy Cutter, Carmen sat alone, hands folded in her lap. A blinking green light glowed on the armrest. "Orders, ma'am." Jess asked from the helm. "Hold position." "We could finish it now." Carmen turned slightly. Her voice dropped to something nearly invisible. "We already did." Back at the Dominion core world, thousands of public screens blinked on in perfect sync. Carmen's face appeared, serene as ever. "To the citizens of the Zytherian Dominion," she said, "this is not an attack. This is the conclusion of your empire's decisions. No threats. No demands. Just a statement." Then the screens went black. Within 3 minutes, The Zytherian treasury emptied into galactic charitable funds. Their warships defaulted into safe mode. AI governing cores rewrote their own allegiance files and rebooted in Earth Standard. No one died. No weapons fired. No soldiers deployed. Yet the Zytherian Dominion ceased to exist. The timer on Daisy Cutter hit midnight. On the bridge, no one cheered. No one clapped. They simply exhaled. Captain Hughes, watching the stream from Earth, said quietly, "That was beautiful." "It was necessary," Carmen replied. Jess glanced over. "So what now?" Carmen stood. "Now we send tea. And condolences. And after that?" She picked up her cup, now cold. "We wait. They'll need us to rebuild what we took. And when they ask how we did it," Carmen's smile returned. A quiet curve of lips sharpened by meaning. "We'll tell them the truth." She walked out. The stars did not celebrate. They only bore witness. The galaxy was quiet, but not in the way peace brings. It was the silence of stunned observers, of diplomats too afraid to send messages, of tyrants realizing too late that the rules had changed. The Zytherian Dominion, once the loudest presence in interstellar negotiations, now broadcast nothing. No denials, no declarations, no calls to allies. Their empire hadn't been destroyed in fire, but in absence, in the systematic removal of everything they thought was untouchable. Carmen Knox sat in a chair far too ordinary for someone who had just unmade an empire. The conference room aboard the Daisy Cutter had no grandeur, just dark wood paneling, a round table, and quiet lighting that hummed low like a lullaby. She placed a stack of folders in front of her with the same care a baker might use setting out fresh biscuits. Her senior officers filed in slowly. Jess, the helmsman, removed her flight gloves as she took a seat. Varga entered next, knitting needles, stilled at last. Captain Hughes lingered at the door, eyes scanning for anything out of place, but found only calm. "Thank you all for coming," Carmen said. Hughes raised an eyebrow. "You mean thank you for surviving the single most efficient deconstruction of a military superpower in galactic history?" She gave a soft smile. "Let's not get sentimental. We didn't fire a single weapon. Not when we put on a ship," she corrected. They went quiet. Not in fear, but in understanding. Carmen opened the top folder and spread out images. Zytherian fleet schematics, now obsolete. Command protocols, now rendered public domain. Scans of warships that days ago had menaced planets and now drifted in silent surrender. "Phase 3 is ready," Vargo offered, voice unusually subdued. Carmen nodded. "But we won't move until they understand." Jess frowned. "Understand what? That we could have leveled their entire culture and didn't? That we were in their homes, their systems, their thoughts before they even noticed?" "No," Carmen said gently. "They need to understand that we still gave them a choice." Outside, the diplomatic corridors, others were beginning to understand. On a backwater moon in the Graxan archipelago, a Zytherian science vessel flared to life again after a week of dead silence. Its systems rebooted with Earth-standard AI protocols, complete with human voice settings. The lead scientist, a female Zytherian named Sarek, hissed in confusion as the ship responded to her request for navigation data with a soft, polite, "Yes, ma'am. We've taken the liberty of correcting your course." Sarek's claws twitched. "Who authorized this AI integration?" A moment's pause. "Then, you did, ma'am. When you downloaded that tea recipe last year." Back aboard the Daisy Cutter, Carmen folded her hands. "That particular scientist now has access to our full medical archive, logistics planning, and unclassified terraforming techniques. She will believe it is a gift. And, in a way, it is." Hughes chuckled without humor. "A gift with very specific terms." "Exactly," Carmen said. "Our terms." Elsewhere, General Vorix sat in a private recovery chamber on Zytherian Prime. Once a war titan, now demoted in all but name. His scales were dulled, eyes less sharp. Yet the fury remained. He watched the footage on a secure line, the video Carmen had released, the one she knew would circulate among his military. Calm, clear, absolute. "We do not invade," she had said, "because we do not need to. We offer peace." You called it weakness. We allowed that belief to live for a time. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't shown weapons. But the implied promise underneath it, the one every species now feared, was more piercing than any fleet. Voryx's claws scraped the table, deep gouges marking frustration. Why? He muttered aloud to no one. Why didn't they finish us? The room answered with silence. And silence, he now understood, was the most human sound of all. In a neutral orbital bar, two non-human diplomats sipped fluorescent beverages and argued in hushed tones. They should have retaliated. Zytherian aggression was clear. Yes, but humans never play the hand they show. That's just superstition. They're logical. They plan. There are limits. You think what they've done has limits. I think they could have erased our council, and they didn't. That means something. It means we're still useful. Back on Earth, a broadcast went live across galactic channels. Carmen didn't appear this time. Instead, the feed displayed a map, galactic, precise, yet fluid. Red zones slowly shifted to neutral, then to soft green, labeled provisionally stabilized. No ships moved. No threats issued. The entire display functioned more like a weatherman gently informing an empire that they had already lost. The caption beneath the map read simply, "This is your grace period ending." It wasn't a threat. It was a courtesy. A courtesy the Dominion had now exhausted. Hughes paced the war room with the energy of a soldier unused to standing still. You really think they'll sue for peace? Carmen poured herself fresh tea and didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was cool as the porcelain cup. No, I think they'll test us one last time. Jess glanced up. How? They'll try to remove me. Quietly. Assassination, scandal, discrediting. Something theatrical enough to feel satisfying. Something desperate enough to smell like pride. You going to let them? Of course. She sipped. I'm their final lesson. The hit didn't come as a ship or a bomb. It came as a story. A leaked file claiming Carmen Knox was not born on Earth. That she had been genetically engineered by an outlaw Terran fringe group. That her memories had been shaped by artificial narratives. That she wasn't a diplomat, but a designed socio-psychological weapon. The leak spread fast. Predictable. Elegant. Fools often believed the fire they set wouldn't burn their own house. Carmen watched the file arrive in her inbox, scanned it, then forwarded it to 20 galactic ambassadors without editing a word. Truth or not, Hugh said, it paints a target. She shook her head. It paints a mirror. Let them see themselves in it. 3 ambassadors resigned the next day. 5 others issued statements of solidarity. The Zytherian Dominion, now functionally leaderless, had no formal reaction. They had, in their desperation, accused the one person who held their empire's structure together through mercy. And the galaxy noticed. The shift wasn't loud. It never was with humans. But it echoed in meeting rooms and hushed discussions. The narrative changed from why did the humans retaliate to why didn't they retaliate sooner? On the Daisy Cutter, the crew sat in the common room for once. No alarms, no orders. Just tea, cards, and the knowledge of a job not just done, but done perfectly. Jess leaned against the wall. You know what gets me? They thought it was about vengeance. It never was, Carmen replied. It was about clarity. Still, seems like we got the better end of the deal. Carmen turned her gaze toward the starscape, her voice soft but cutting. No, they got to keep their lives. We kept their respect. One of those things can be taken again. Varga's comm unit chimed. Ma'am, she said, sitting up, incoming message from the Arcadian Council. They'd like to formally offer a seat to the Human Diplomatic Front on their Intertrade Commission. Accept. And send a gift. What kind of gift? A crate of Zytherian spice bark. With a note that reads, We forgive easy, but we don't forget. Hughes barked a laugh. That'll make the rounds. It should. Later, in the privacy of her quarters, Carmen reviewed her own files, not reports, but personal logs, voice memos, reflections, pieces of a woman who had smiled for decades while slowly becoming a blade disguised as velvet. Note to self, she said quietly into the recorder. Cytherian collapse occurred within projected parameters. No unexpected resistance. Civilian casualties, 0. Ethical assessment, acceptable. She paused. Emotional assessment. There was a long silence. Then she closed the file. Some things didn't need to be recorded. As the Daisy Cutter coasted quietly through space, a final message arrived. Not from the Cytherian remnants, but from a species that had watched closely, the silent Nalari, who communicated only through scent and visual modulation. Their message was simple. Translated loosely, it read, "We thought you were small, but small things kill quietest." Carmen closed the message and finally, after what felt like weeks, allowed herself to sit. She leaned back, rested her hands in her lap, and looked out the window. The stars didn't blink. The galaxy didn't cheer. But somewhere, deep in the bones of power, a new truth settled like dust. The humans had smiled, and smiled, and smiled. And now they were done smiling. The sky above Earth had never looked so still. On the porch of a weather-worn farmhouse nestled into the green folds of Virginia, Carmen Knox sat in a rocking chair, a knitted shawl draped over her shoulders. A chipped porcelain cup sat in her hand, steam curling lazily in the autumn air. She watched the leaves fall, slow, deliberate, each one taking its time, as if the planet, like her, had no more need to rush. The war never officially happened. There were no parades, no headlines screaming victory. That was the way humans preferred it. The galaxy had been reshaped, yes, but politely, diplomatically, as if billions hadn't watched the Cytherian dominion vanish without a scream, only silence, and the firm sound of doors closing forever. And Carmen had come home. The Daisy Cutter floated in high orbit, a relic now. The crew had been rotated out, reassigned to other posts, other games. Captain Hughes had taken a retirement package he didn't expect to live long enough to enjoy. Jess was flying Earth-Mars diplomatic routes, now the cushiest job in the solar system. Varga had started her own knitting podcast, inexplicably popular among alien species. They had returned to lives, like veterans from a war no one acknowledged. But Carmen? Carmen simply returned to where it all began. To quiet, to rain, to tea. The boards beneath her chair creaked as someone stepped onto the porch. She didn't look up. "I was wondering when they'd send someone," she said softly. A younger woman stood beside her, mid-30s, sharp features, government suit. Her posture screamed training, but her expression flickered with uncertainty. "You're Carmen Knox," the woman said. "I certainly was," Carmen replied. "And you are?" "Agent Lillian Tran, Diplomatic Corps, Division of Strategic Analysis." Carmen sipped her tea. "You poor thing." Lillian hesitated. "May I sit?" Carmen gestured to the other rocker. "Long as you don't mind the company of leaves and ghosts." Lillian sat stiffly. Her fingers tapped against her thigh in quiet code, a signal Carmen hadn't heard in years. Trained, nervous, watching. "You're not here for pleasantries," Carmen said. "No, ma'am." "Good. I don't serve them anymore." Lillian swallowed. "They asked me to debrief you. Off the record. Because they think I'm a liability? Because they think you might not be done." The wind rustled the trees. Carmen let the silence linger like old music. "Are you done?" Lillian asked. Carmen didn't answer right away. She rocked once, twice, then set her teacup on the table with a soft clink. "I did not dismantle an empire because I wanted to win," she said. "I did it because I wanted to stop." Lillian frowned. "Stop what?" "The game. The endless performance. The posturing." Carmen looked up, her gaze still sharp enough to skin a lie. "We offered peace. They tried to kill me. So I showed them what peace costs when you mistake it for weakness." Lillian hesitated. "There are rumors that the Cytherians weren't the true reason behind Protocol Dahlia. That you had intelligence suggesting a wider plot." Carmen reached for the teapot and refilled her cup. "There's always a wider plot, Agent Tran. That's the problem. There's always someone waiting behind the curtain, thinking they're smarter than the room. Is that who we're watching now?" Carmen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No, you're not watching them. They're watching you. Lillian's hand twitched toward the communicator clipped to her belt. Don't, Carmen said gently. They're already listening. Across the galaxy, in a system just outside mapped trade space, a cluster of ships hung dead in the water. Not destroyed. Disabled. Their drives corrupted, guidance scrambled. Each bore no markings, but their designs were too precise, too uniform. Not pirates. Not civilians. Observers. They had been trailing human vessels for months. Studying. Testing response times. Measuring defenses. They had not expected silence in return. No interception. No chase. Only soft digital interference, like someone humming over your comms, just enough to make you nervous. Until today. The first ship blinked out, its hull collapsing inward without a sound. Not destroyed. Removed. The rest followed. On Earth, Carmen sipped her tea. Lillian stared at her. Was that you? No. That was their own reflection. They saw what we let them become. And they blinked. You planted it. I offer them a mirror. Why? Carmen leaned forward. Because humanity's greatest threat isn't in our ships or our soldiers. It's in our clarity. We understand what war does. We remember. We do not rush into fire. But if you force our hand, we won't strike back. We'll erase the reason to strike at all. Lillian's voice dropped. That sounds like a warning. No sugar, Carmen said softly. That's the grace period ending. For a long moment, the only sound was the rustle of wind, the creak of old wood, the drip of condensation from her cup. You didn't just end an empire, Lillian whispered. You started something else. Carmen's smile turned colder. I started something that can't be named yet. Because if you name it, you have to reckon with it. Lillian stood slowly. So what happens now? Now. Carmen leaned back, letting the chair rock again. Now we see who remembers their manners. Lillian hesitated, then pulled something from her jacket, a sealed envelope. From the council. They want you to come back. They're building something new. They say you should help guide it. Carmen took the envelope, didn't open it. I'll read it after I finish my tea. Lillian nodded. She stepped off the porch, boots crunching on gravel. Then paused. You terrify them. Carmen nodded. They should ask themselves why a woman with a smile and a teacup made them bleed. Lillian opened her mouth, closed it. Then she walked away. Carmen sat alone again. The wind picked up. Across the galaxy, unknown species huddled in their own war rooms. Files were opened. Meetings held. Some wondered if humanity had created a new weapon. Others whispered of AI beyond understanding, of genetic prodigies, of sleeper fleets hidden in stars. None of them were right, but none of them were safe either. On the porch, Carmen finished her cup and smiled. Just once. Far above, a signal pulsed silently from an old satellite, a heartbeat. Not a command. Not a strike. A whisper. We see you. For those watching, it was a message. For those waiting, it was a reminder. The galaxy had misunderstood what humanity was. They would not do so again.